a first step in the right direction with a business model that is very interesting, or better than carbon credits.
Way more interesting than carbon credits, yeah.
Fuel producers, they have money. With money, we can start experimenting. With money, we can start helping growers move the needle on their business. And we can start understanding more of the curiosity of what it is to be regenerative.
And then what triggered you to like, okay, let's look actually, why are they paying us?
It's not about this is good, this is evil. It's really about like, let's get curious about a topic.
This is the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast, Investing as if the planet mattered, where we talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land and sea, grow our food and what we eat, wear and consume. It's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet.
Today with the co-founder of Regenrate, regenerative certified fuels, making feedstock, productions and simplified certification possible for sustainable air fuel through cover crops at scale. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
I mean, there's a lot of words that we usually don't use, I think, in the podcast. I mean, cover crops definitely, yes, and scale as well, but sustainable air fuel, pretty sure it's the first time I mention it here. Anyway, maybe somebody will correct me, but we'll get to that and why it's so relevant and interesting for farmers and for land and, of course, obviously for soil. But first, starting with a personal question, I mean, we've known each other for quite a while through Fresh. Shout out to the Fresh team. And we had Tim, actually your co-founder, on the podcast in September 23. With a different business model, with a different, like not a different company, but let's say a pre-pivoted company. So we'll get into that journey as well. But what led you to spending most of your waking hours focusing on cover crops and in this case, sustainable air fuel? How did you stumble on, or how did you, because I don't think people are born and get out of university and think, I'm going to focus on cover crops and sustainable air fuel. Like what was the journey there?
At the very beginning, it was just really my love for the food that we eat and for the quality of food. And when we're talking about food, then obviously we're talking about how it's being produced, and then we're looking at the soil. So when I joined the Fresh Venture Studio, it was back in November. Well, it was the program first, back in November 2021. The desire was to make higher quality food more available at a global scale. And when I mean higher quality food, it's like food that was tasty, was grown more naturally. I thought the mass of the consumer deserved something better. So that's where I met Tim, who has been on the podcast, and quite quickly looking at the regenerative agriculture practice, then we came down to understanding that cover crops were an essential practice. And it was also a practice that did not require a lot of change. It required an extra seeding, and then it would provide all those benefits to the soil. So we quickly targeted cover crops as an area where we wanted to start a business in. And we've experimented across a number of products, even before we came up with the regenerative hotline, that were all about cover crops. And quickly we realized that indeed the knowledge around cover crops was not widely spread, and that we could have a role to play in advising farmers on planting cover crops and also on other regenerative agriculture practices. And actually cover crops was the topic where we advised farmers the most. They were the most interested in this during the entire life of the regenerative outline. Farmers really asked cover crop questions all over the world. It was an interesting topic for everyone.
And just to give an understanding for people like in Europe or for farmers, like I remember some numbers when talking to Tim back in 2021, but for sure you have them more accurate, like how little or how much are cover crops used? Like how much potential is there still if you look at just Europe or the numbers are we close to 50 fields? Are we close to 10%? Like what's the, because it's such a low hanging fruit, it seems from the outside obviously, and there are a lot of barriers why it's not happening. But I was almost imagining we were further along, like we were like most farmers or many farmers do it. Of course, when you drive through agricultural land, you see a lot of, let's say, naked soil. So you know that there are no cover crops in the winter or in the off season. But just to give an understanding, like what numbers are we talking about in terms of usage and non-usage?
Yeah, this is a difficult number to give you because at least in Europe, soil cover can also be that you put a little bit of residues on the field, so you would have some straw, and then that's considered soil covered. To our perspective, it's not.
Sure. It's not a crop.
It's not a cover crop.
Yeah.
It's there is definitely some soil cover, and most of the reports that you have available, they will include some of this practice as well in the soil cover. They won't tell you this is the amount of cover crops that are being grown. This is technically an interesting technical challenge because we do have the capabilities of recognizing remote sensing wise when the fields are growing something, so not just some residues but growing something. It is also a rather costly effort, and I would say like the resources are probably invested in something else than curiosity at the moment. In terms of percentage,
I think it's possible, right? Yeah, you can. We just had Tom Engel of OpenGeoHub on the podcast, which might be out at this time or just after. But we're getting to a point, or we might be that we can distinguish between just some straw on the field and living roots, which of course is what we want, and preferably a diverse living roots, let's say carpet on the land. So it's difficult to say. Do you have any ballpark number that you're working with or you're keeping in mind? Like, okay, we want to move it from X to X, X to Y?
So right now we're probably around between 20%, I would say, and 30%. So that's kind of the ballpark number we're working with. And actually, those growers that already have cover crops, they are a very interesting target for us. Because they're already doing it, and usually they want to move this from a cost towards a revenue making.
Because was that the barrier you saw when you like in the hotline? You got a lot of farmers asking about how do I get cover crops in? What should I use, etc.
Exactly.
And
so the next
almost always a cost, right?
Yeah. So the next answer we would provide would be probably about looking at the context of the farm, looking at the budget they would have, and then trying to work out something along the line of what they needed for their context, for their budget. And in the end, they were like, well, it's still a cost. And I don't really see the benefits.
Maybe next year.
The benefits are not clear at this point. So it was when I want to move from a nothing towards a cover crop. In the main cases, it's well, maybe next year or the year after. And in the end, the advice on us will also be lost, right? That was definitely the main blocker. The main blocker was the impact that the hotline actually have. It was nice to have advice, but very seldomly implemented when we inquire in the end. And the second blocker was the business model of the Regenerative hotline. The farmers were not willing to pay what it costed us to put in place. And we're a technology company. We're looking to automate some of that advice where possible. Not a long shot of what was needed could be paid by the growers in order for us to provide this advice, at least in the early years, looking at the amount of data we needed to automate some of that. So that couldn't really work in terms of, one, the business model we were producing, and second, the actual impact. It was a cost. There was no clear benefits to a cover crop. Therefore, this was not and never a priority.
And so then you go back to the drawing board. Then how? Where do you start looking for unblocking some of those blockers?
Going back to the drawing board, curiously, at that point of time, we had one customer. We had only one paying customer, and they were paying very good money, and it was a biofuel producer. And we didn't quite understand the use case at the time. They were just using our backend to look at the time series of data we were producing on each of the fields that were of interest, and looking at when the cover crops were growing, and essentially to when there was cover crop growing and justifying that there was nothing in the past, and they were not really explicit about what was that used for.
So they were asking, basically they were looking at the data, seeing if there was anything grown in the past on that field, and so they could not certify, but of course you're going there, like be sure that the cover crop that was grown on that farm, on that field, was sort of non-competitive to other things.
Yeah, so we didn't quite know that at the time. They just instructed us on look at the data this way and this way, and in the end, indeed, we had time series and knowing where at which point what was growing, and it was really about cover crops. And then we started to realize, and indeed, we're looking at rice fields, and this biofuel producer was planting several different crops during the season where nothing is growing, so where the land was bare, and the result of that was they were studying that all those different oil crops were coming indeed from the season where the rice was not growing and where nothing was growing on the fields, and we started really going down the rabbit hole of why oil crops with rice fields, and what was happening here. And very soon we came to the exact use case that we're working on, the fuel versus fuel debate, the European regulation that there is around it, the certification that is needed for certain type of fuels, and we're going back to Sustainable Aviation Fuel in a minute. But that's what they were doing. So we're like, okay, so there is something about cover crop that is interesting, and there is certainly one organization that is making money with it and that is paying farmers to grow it. Is that something that we could potentially do?
Do you remember when that sort of first hook came up and the rabbit hole opened? Like you were because I can imagine it was also a tricky and most probably difficult time. Like your hotline is not working as you were hoping. You have one paying customer, which keeps sort of the light on, but you also don't know if that's just a fling and will disappear in a second. And then what triggered you to like, okay, let's look actually why are they paying us, and why are they using only part of what we're offering, or like asking weird questions that nobody else is asking? Like, what was that moment like to start realizing they're like pulling on that thread basically and start realizing there might be something there?
So it was not the first pivot that we were doing. So like, okay, we were looking at a product that was not going anywhere anytime soon. So I still do believe that there could be such a product. And there is a few other companies that are doing this at the moment. It's not because we have not managed to solve this that others won't. But it was about looking further, where we were receiving a good amount of money to do a job, and it was really about understanding your customer. What I didn't like about it at that time, I think what was the most difficult personal decision, is fight my idealism. When I started Fresh Venture, and when we started working together with Tim, there was two types of company I really didn't want to work with, and it was fuel companies and seeds company. One producing chemicals or destroying what I thought was like nature through chemicals, and the other one the seeds that were patenting nature. And the really hard decision was seeing them as part of the system, and as part of as part of an actor that is working, like also trying to do their best on the topic that is decarbonizing our transportation, or moving away from fossil fuel. And this was a hard decision for me, because I only wanted to work with the growers, with the guys in regenerative agriculture.
Food, yeah,
exactly. And those actors were not part of the people I wanted to work with. nonetheless.
So how did you come to terms with that? Like now when you're pitching, building, there's traction, and we'll get to that. Like how did you come to terms with that, with that tension?
It was really seeing how I was locking myself. So there was two options, and none of them were good. There was no solution. So the first one was, well, I don't work with them because this is not what I believe in, and I'm someone of principles, and I will not work with such companies, and I won't even start to get interested about it, because it's really about started to open my mind about something different, right? It's not about this is good, this is evil. It's really about like, let's get curious about a topic. There was the fact that if I decided not to work with them, I could look at everything that I'm using. I'm also taking a car, I'm also taking a plane. Who am I to say this is bad? I mean, they are helping me in a way as well. So in both cases, so either I was a hypocrite for working with them in the first place, or I was a hypocrite for just saying that I'm perfect and they're not. So I made the decision just to be a hypocrite anyway, and this was at least going to move the needle further in terms of everything that we can bring to the space. So fuel producers, they have money. With money, we can start experimenting. With money, we can start helping growers move the needle on their business.
To make it easy for fans to support our work, we launched our membership community, and so many of you have joined us as a member. Thank you. If our work has created value for you, and if you have the means, consider joining us. Find out more on gumroad.com/investing-in-regen-ag, or find the link below.
And we can start understanding more of the curiosity of what it is to be regenerative, right? So why it works in one way, why it doesn't work in the other way. So that opened a lot of doors for me.
And so where are you now in terms of Regenrate? I think there's of course the pivot, you're starting to focus, a different name as well. It was called farmland before. But like if you had to describe it now I'm not saying in an elevator pitch, but we're recording this in January 2025, just to give people an overview and to also show like what happens when you hit a traction moment, or when you hit a market, in this case, the sustainable air fuel market, with the right regulation, and we're getting to that, or with regulation that's pushing it, like seems to be a perfect storm or a perfect moment, at least for our market, and there are margins, then suddenly a lot of things become possible. And it unblocks or unlocks a lot of things. Like what would you say you're currently doing in this beginning of the year of 2025?
We planted our first own pilots in 2024. So right now we're in the middle of the growing season with our. That's like so scary, but on the other hand, it's going so well. It's so exciting. We're receiving pictures very often. The growers are very engaging. They're also trying something new. We don't know whether it will fit the entire season. So we're growing crops over winter, and we're growing it in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Spain and Portugal. So we don't know if the window that we have will be fitting everywhere, and that's also why we have several countries, so we can study different climates, different varieties. So we're doing some tests. All the farmers there, they have different practices. We're doing some camelina mixed with other cover crops. We're doing it also pure. We're looking for understanding the environmental benefits, the income generated for everyone. We're looking at climate. Will climate be in our favor? How do you work with climate year over year to ensure something that is stable? So this is all going on like right now in 2025. So we are anticipating harvests anywhere from April to June, I would say, meaning...
And camelina is an oil crop, just to be...
Correct.
Which then will be crushed into an oil seed, basically.
Exactly.
And this is all land that wouldn't have been covered otherwise, or would have partly been covered? Like what would be the alternative if you wouldn't have been here into, let's say, the winter 24-25? What would have been happening on this land?
So either it's heavy regenerative farms, because we are working with pioneers a little bit at the same time. They would have had a cover crop, but they would not have generated any revenue. Either they would have had either one is a bit more conventional. He would have had either residues, but probably not a cover crop at this point. So I would say still the majority of the farmers that will work with us in the next season, they are regenerative and they are placing something already. There's a portion that are a bit more conservative and therefore have not switched over, and we are the triggering factor.
Did you it will be harvest in a number of months, and then what's going to happen?
So it will be harvested in a number of months, and then we're going to store it until the large amounts are coming up, because crushing an oil seed is very expensive when there is not too much quantity, and that's why especially this plant can be found in very high price. The oil can be found very high price because there is very small quantities. So what we will do is we'll store it until all the trials of 2025 are also harvested, and that will be September, October. So what we're also doing is now heavily recruiting farmers, mainly in France at this moment. We think France is a very good region for the summer. So after all the winter crops such as barley, winter wheat, usually there is another moment where the soil is less bare until they plant the next winter grain. And we're working mainly in France. We'll be working mainly in France next year for this first season. And then the second season, with the winter season, here we'll work probably mainly in Spain and Portugal. That's where we see that it has the most benefit and also the best conditions. So yeah, heavily recruiting farmers. It's been a ride as well. We've had a lot of demand from farmers. We have quite a high success rate. So usually in the 8.
Which is a nice difference to have.
It's crazy.
Like, there's a different ask. Yeah.
It's crazy
compared to a few years ago.
When we were selling the regenerative outline, growers had so much, I would say, trust issues in sharing anything about their farms. Now I know everything. I know their life.
Because you come with money in your hand.
Yeah,
you come with a concept.
It changed everything. Yeah. And then I'm like, and we're also giving that sets of digital tools to you, so we can all monitor our investments and yours. And they're like, oh, that's wonderful. Can I use it as well for my other crops? I'm like, ooh, that is not what we were used to when we were having the regenerative outline.
And just for farmers' perspective, like of course on a hectare, it depends a bit on the scale, but what's in it for the farmers in terms of revenue, and also what would it normally have cost? Like a regenerative ones, they do it anyway, but it's a cost to them. Like what difference does it make to work with you and have the camelina in, and of course have it harvested and shipped off from the farm? Like what's in it for them?
Yeah, so it moves the cover crop from a cost towards revenue making. So you're not going to make like the most revenue in it. So food is still the main revenue generator, but at least
it's good for the idealist Alice on the call.
Yeah, exactly. But at least now we're all making something, right? And yeah, in some cases it can be very good. So right now we don't have yet price differentiation for the region that we're working in. We're only working in Europe, so we're not working with other parts of the world yet. We have our plan to expand the year after. So it can be quite small, or it can be a bit more substantial. But in any case, it is revenue generating, right? at the moment. It is not a cost
Which
anymore.
is massive for farmers. And how important, we'll get to the regulation, but the like food or feed versus fuel discussion, that what triggered you, like what triggered your customer at the time to even look into this. So how do you make sure that you're not competing against food? Should we be eating this oil crop directly? Like what's the answer to the obvious question that I think many people ask? Okay, great, but why do we have to crush this, refine it, and put it in an airplane? Apart from the fact that we have to decarbonize airplanes. And electrification is coming, but slow and not everywhere in the near decades or the near decade plus. So there's a very clear case for sustainable air fuel, I think, but what's the make sure that it's not feed or food and we don't compete with that?
So I think there are several answers to that. So first of all, we leave the main season for food. So the main best season where you have the most sunlight, this is meant for food and it's not going to change. So like the second season that we're looking at, it's risky. So like we have climate events, maybe heavy rain, we can have no rain at all. I mean, probably in summer, that's what's happening. So nothing, no rain, and therefore like the germination can be a bit tricky. So it's a risky season because there is all those factors that we can't really control. And whether we should start planning to make food with that season is up for debate. The main thing that, as far as I'm concerned, is that the main season where we know things work the best, this should be a food season. Then there is a question of how much food do you need, right, as a country, and are we producing what we need at the moment, and how sufficient is the regular season for that? This is also certainly to be looked at. And then probably the last answer to your question is I'm technically market agnostic. So what I like about the SAF market, it's infinite. However you can produce, however you can sell. I mean, it's a commodity, right? So you have to make sure that the price...
SAF is sustainable air fuel.
Sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
So it's a commodity, so you have to make sure that like it's in balance with regard to the other commodities that that are on the market. But right now it's an infinite demand. As long as you have the right price, you will find buyers, right?
Price-wise, like how do you see, I mean, you've done calculations, of course, you're going to see now with harvest, that's mostly theoretical until now.
Yeah.
Like how difficult is it to get into the right price range, do you see with cover crops that are growing in the quote-unquote wrong season?
Yeah, well, that's my job, right? Just find the best paying customer.
Are you comfortable? Yeah.
Well, it's just going to one company, it's like, how much do you pay? And then another one, how much do you pay? Who wants to buy? Like, and it's I would say it's a matter of who's paying the most, right? So, like finding the one that pays the best, and might not be the same person, the same company year over year.
And is that currently in like Europe in the SAF market? Is that really like what's the commodity feeling in that sense? Like, is there a lot of demand for certified? Of course, depending on price, but certified no food competition fuel. Like, is that a relatively easy sell, or do you have to do a lot of education there?
No, it's an easy sell. You're competing at this moment. You're competing on the market with used cooking oil and animal fats. That's like the two, I would say, main feedstock that are used for sustainable aviation fuel. But I can tell you that used cooking oil and animal fats are not scalable. It's not because you need more SAF that you will eat more animals or that you will eat more fries. So this is not scalable. So at the moment, I would say probably the demand is roughly balancing the production. And therefore we kind of align on the price, or we sell a bit more expensive because we still have higher costs. than animal fat, and we're investing in the future, right? We're investing in something that will provide a scalable plan in the future. Animal fat, not scalable. Used cooking oil, not scalable. So therefore, let's do something scalable. So in the future, there will be a different perspective. So the regulation, how much is needed, required to be needed, but also the airline themselves, right? So let's not forget that the SAF movement is first civil-led. It's a civil society-led, so it's companies that decide for themselves to set a higher standard and to use sustainable aviation fuel. And only after regulation came back and said, well, this is actually the amount that you need to have at the airport, for instance, in 2025, 2% of SAF at the airport. All airlines need to have at least, use at least 2% SAF, and this is growing up to 70% by 2050. Right now we're starting low.
Massive.
Yeah.
That's a huge increase in just the amount of tonnage, hectoliters or whatever it's measured. It starts small and it's sort of in balance, you're saying, but you're saying you can see on the horizon that the minimum quantities are going up, which simply means there's not going to be more animal fat nor more cooking oil. It has to come from somewhere. Where does it currently, or is that imported oil from elsewhere? Like what's the alternative of not doing these kind of cover crop based SAFs?
There's a few alternatives. There is also a lot of attention that is being given at renewable fuels from non-biological biological origin. So essentially making fuel from hydrogen. So this is great. Unfortunately, it wouldn't fly all types of carriers. So the larger airplanes couldn't fly on this type of fuel alone. Maybe later, as we move towards 2050, and technology evolve. Right now, what is sure is there is a feedstock. A gap that is being anticipated by all major I would say consulting bureau, S&P Global. So everybody is talking about the feedstock shortage that we'll see in the next few years. Animal fats, used cooking oil, still ongoing. Forests, residue from forests, sustainable forests, also a possibility. Needs to be sure though that it's all sustainable. Could be issues as well with sorting and diminishing the size, for instance, of logs. There is different techniques for different approach. It's all in the end also a matter of cost. There will probably be a space on the market for all types of feedstock, this included. And the question is now, how do we fill the gap for this shortage that is about to happen? And cover crops is a huge potential. It is a huge potential. And today it's not a commercial practice. It's being explored by a few players, as included. The other players, very big players, very, very big. So we're like David in this story.
And like your fundraising at the moment, and full disclosure, we're investing with our syndicate, Generation Re, as well. And do you see, like, on this topic, even for the more, like, let's say, regenerative focused investors, do you need to do a lot of education about even the biofuel market and sustainable aviation fuel, and of course cover crops? Like how has been the fundraising, or are people actually quite quickly grasping the potential here, understanding the potential? Like what has been your conversations with investors over the last months?
So I think everybody kind of agrees that this is cool. There is
which is already a start.
Yeah. So this is cool. It depends a little bit to which investor we're talking. Some thinks that the invention is smart, but it's not. There is not a lot of, I would say, IP captured. It's it's a smart way of doing things. So yeah, we're a software team, so we're building as well on our strengths on that side. But yeah, I would say it is bringing an alternative model to regenerative agriculture in the space. So right now there was only one really business model, maybe two. Okay, but I say the most known one is carbon credits, and I would say the second that I think works well is also buying land and regenerating and selling it. I love this model as well, but you need a lot of capital for that. I don't have that much capital. And
we'll get to that question in a second.
yeah. But this one is also a business model because we're subsidizing a cover crop. Well, subsidizing, we make money with it ourselves as well, right? But we're also looking to implement a lot of the technique of regenerative agriculture with it, which is minimum disturbance, a very healthy crop rotation. So the core of what we're doing is having a first smart crop rotation. So we're never mixing. So we're developing currently camelina, right? And we're never mixing camelina before beet, for instance. It's a bad rotation. It will not help anything. So we're also looking at all the plants that this could be great. It could be great with soybeans because soybeans repel some of the cyst nematodes that soya is attracting. So it is a first step in the right direction with a business model that is very interesting, far better than carbon credits.
Way more interesting than carbon credits. Yeah,
way more interesting.
I remember some slides from a long time ago, like per hectare. I mean, we're not going to name exact numbers here, but let's say having another cash crop, because this is another cash crop with costs associated to it, and actually a lot of benefits for your soil. And when well implemented, not before beets apparently. It makes a lot of sense in your, of course it's a more longer term, but it makes a lot of sense in your soil management and health strategy as well. And so we love to ask this question in a way, like what do you, let's say we do this on stage, of course our podcast and syndicate are virtual, but let's say we do this on stage somewhere and we have a room full of investors, and of course people are excited, we show a lot of pictures, they're interested, but what people also forget, like what would be one thing you want people to remember the next day in their office if they have to do something? Like what would be a seed you would like to plant in let's say a room full of financially focused people?
A room of so that means their condition is, or they already have this focus, right? They're already financially focused. That's what they're looking at, and
they're financially focused, yeah.
And they want to invest in regenerative agriculture.
That would be a nice outcome. That's not necessarily, it could be, let's say, a room full of people managing their own wealth, and maybe other people's could be partly institutional, and they're curious, let's say, but fully convinced, maybe not. But if there's one thing you want them to remember from an evening where we have a lot of conversations about cover crops and SAFs, etc., what would be the one thing they really should remember about this space?
That's, to me, the one thing that would make sense. It's like it's a space where everybody's learning and everybody's experimenting. Yeah, and working with nature is not straightforward, but it has like tremendous potential. It has tremendous potential in the sense that we want to work together, I guess, with nature as a system, and not we have to be part of the system, and that nature works with us, but we also have to understand how nature works. So, I guess my one thing that I would like to tell them is, there is probably not a simple recipe that can solve it all. And probably that local solution also can work and can provide good returns, especially in the field of agriculture. There is a paradigm in investment that is always about scale and scale as much, and like straight away from the get-go and get me my 10x in the next 5 years. In agriculture, come on, man.
That's a very good point, to make and to drill into people. Like this takes time, immense opportunities of impact we probably cannot even imagine, but it takes time. It's working with nature, and that's
also maybe add It's yeah. Well, I've also maybe added it's fun. Just get interested. Like it's really fun. So maybe you wait a bit longer on this investment than it is on another, but maybe it can become very fun and understanding. Oh, this works. Oh, that doesn't. Oh. How can we make this and this in slightly different things so it works as well? I think the rewards can be very, very, very big.
Yeah, and I think that people are like there's a curiosity within farmers that are on this journey. There's a curiosity within people that are working here. There's a curiosity of knowing we're very early, but also figuring a lot of these things out and sort of realizing we're in a special time, that we're figuring a lot of these things out. And we have technology that's coming in at a way that we didn't have 2, 3, 4, 5, let alone 10 years ago. And we have, of course, climate weirding, but we also have markets that weren't there a few years ago to pay for cover crops that suddenly it makes sense. And if we would switch, I mean, you also hinted a bit to it already before, but if we would switch let's say the side of the table and give you a significant investment portfolio of, let's say, €1 billion, so 1 with 9 zeros. I'm not looking for investment advice, obviously, which we're not giving here, and I'm not looking for exact numbers, but I'm curious, what would you focus on if you had, let's be clear, a crazy amount of money to put to work? Could be very long term, there's no need to have it back in 3 years or 5 years, etc. But it had to be put to work. What would you do if you had that amount of money to put to work?
Do I need to absolutely focus on one thing, or can I diversify a little bit?
No. Super diversified.
Yes. Okay. So I would probably put a good portion in buying land and regenerating land. So this is a business model for me that proves to be working. Like the land is going up, making it more fertile is great. So I think I would definitely put a rather large portion into that. But however, if it's just 1 billion, it's not that much money. Yeah, like in buying land,
land goes quickly. Yeah,
it goes quickly. Then I'll probably invest a little bit in technology. Just making sure we collect learnings across the globe, at least across my portfolio, that I want to make a bit more maybe efficient. And lastly, I will invest some of it in science, and science that is not that has not very much been explored. And here looking at two sides that are fascinating. I don't know much about it because I don't have a lot of time to look and learn new crazy science about chemistry and in depth. But it's a redox potential of the soil. I think it's really fascinating. Like the redox is an acidity ratio on conductivity ratio, and how some redox potential are more favoring life, while some other are more favoring fungus or bacteria, and therefore could be very interesting to explain how some certain types of soil are more into developing some certain bacteria or fungus. And the second thing I would spend a little bit of my money on is on easy water. So easy water is also, it's a structural water. I think it's really interesting. It goes down to the quantum physics and how water is being structured, and basically how water is transporting the property of the soil back into the plant. So I think two very interesting domains that I don't have much time of exploring, but I think it's fascinating, and could very well complement what is going on in the other two parts of the business.
Like in terms of geography, would you focus in terms of crops as well, like in terms of farmland buying? Where would you move first if you have thought about that?
Well, I definitely don't have thought about that. No.
But like more Mediterranean, or like, I mean, of course, if you go into certain countries like the Netherlands, your money finishes way quicker in terms of hectares you can buy. And of course, other places are potentially easier to get access to. I mean, I think it depends on It depends on the ROI and places and who's going to farm. That's always I think the successful examples we've seen is when people partner with experienced regen farm managers on the ground, because otherwise it can quickly end up being very costly. But if you do that, I think that combination is very interesting.
So now quickly thinking about it, I'd probably use principle-based decision making on that. And since I'm a European person living in Europe, that probably means that I have a responsibility of fixing the system wherever I am. Not at other places of the world. There is like highly qualified and great people that could do the same for where they're located. So I probably work where I am and try to move the needle around me. If I move houses and location, I'd probably be part of a problem somewhere else. So I'd probably want to do something somewhere else. Probably in Europe for that reason. Yeah.
Changing gears in terms of question, you're no longer in charge of your investment portfolio, but you do have a magic wand. So you can change one thing overnight, only one thing. This is an impossible question, I know, but it's interesting to see again where priorities are with people. If they could actually anything, could be better taste, better flavor, global consciousness, or very practically changing the CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy in Europe. Or anything else, could be not within food and ag as well. But if you could change one thing and one thing only, what would that be?
I think I would want the growers to be in a good place financially. Because if that's the case, like all growers I've met, they're curious. They want to experiment. They want to understand how their land works and what they can do better and what they can change. And if you just remove the financial pressure, I'm pretty sure there would be a lot more people willing to experiment and to be curious and try new things, because they don't have to run towards revenue for their family and their lives. So I would just do that, like make them in a financially good place.
Eradicate a lot of farmer debt would probably help. With that, like you're now moving yourself within, let's say, the SAF world. I'm not sure how big it is. For sure there are conferences and events and like within your bubble of the Sustainable Aviation Fuel, where do you think different? Like this question is inspired by John Kemp, that always asks, what do you believe to be true about agriculture that others don't? In this case, what do you believe to be true about sustainable aviation fuel that others don't? And so where do you think contrarian in that space? And where do you, where do you think different?
Well, I think I'm in this very paradigm. Sustainable aviation fuel can subsidize regenerative agriculture. I think that if you're having that type of discourse, it's not a common discourse. So I think this.
And then you get a lot of pushback. Like, is that because I'm asking, both I think in the regenerative space, that's probably raises a few eyebrows, but let's say in the sustainable air fuel space or aviation fuel, where do you get weird looks or not pushbacks, but is that how different are you in that? In that
world? In that world, I'm solving a problem, and I think there is a lot of pragmatism. Can you bring me what I need for something that is affordable, like that the price is good to me, and if I can do some communication on it, great. So I don't know. I think it's probably a lot more pragmatic. I'm thinking
compared to the big ones, you say a few people are developing these, but they're very big companies and we're small. Is there a different approach or a different way of doing things? Or it's everybody scrambling to try to figure out these things?
There's definitely a different approach. So there's definitely a different approach. So we build on the relationships we have with farmer and the technical advice and the guidance. This is not something that the very big are doing. They're giving out PDFs and they're like, you do this. If it's like the way I want, I buy it. If it's not the way I want, I don't buy it. So there is no guidance. It's just like a relationship that is doesn't really exist. And for us, it's the opposite. So we're really investing in the relationships because we want to learn. We see it as an iteration. It's not because this year we have nothing that next year we won't have nothing. We see it really as an iteration, and I want to learn from every case where we fail. So next year we have the opportunity to succeed, or the year after, and not only succeed but grow over time. So to me, it's a relationship. And this is very different, and also because we have the capacity of, with the hotline, we have the capacity, with the technological capacity of handling a lot of farmers' relation, and we'll see put that product to stress in the next year or two. Probably at the end of the year already, it will put to a stress that it has never been.
It's being used more than it had been when it was the core product.
Yeah, we've entirely become internal customer of our own tech, initially.
Which is how many good tech products are born, I think, in terms of fixing an issue you have yourself and then see if others have the same. I think it's a good, I think that the focus on relationship is a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. It's, again, John Kemp, I think, and others is I think mentioned something, I'm butchering the quote for sure, but the journey in regenerative agriculture is mostly, or regeneration is mostly about restoring relationships between people and the land, but also trees and soil, plants and soil, animals and trees, animals and plants, and all of that combined. So it's a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. I want to thank you so much, Alice, for being here, for sharing the pivots along the way and coming to a very interesting point, and of course for allowing us to invest with our syndicate, and thanking for you for coming on here to share about the journey. Won't be the last time, I think. I can't imagine massive pivots in the next time, but of course looking forward to checking in of how sustainable aviation fuels have taken off cover crop adaptation across Europe, which would be great to see happening.
Thank you so much, Koen, for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. For show notes and links we discussed in this episode, check out our website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/posts. If you liked this episode, why not share it with a friend? Get in touch with us and tell us what you liked about it. And give us a rating on Apple Podcast or Spotify or your podcast player. That really, really helps us. Thanks again, and until next time.